My name is Sarah Collins. I'm 26 years old, and the story I'm about to tell begins the night I stepped into an engagement party I never really wanted to attend. From the moment I walked through those doors, something inside me knew it wasn't just going to be another celebration. It was going to be the night that shifted everything I thought I knew about myself and about the way people saw me. I had debated all week whether I should even go. The invitation had arrived in the mail weeks before, tucked inside a cream-colored envelope with golden edges that screamed money and status. It was from Lauren, someone I once called a friend, though that friendship had long since dissolved into something sharper, something that left me feeling belittled every time we spoke. Lauren and I met in high school, back when cliques mattered more than kindness. She was always the center of attention, the girl who seemed to glide through life with confidence. Me? I was quieter, more reserved, the one teachers liked but classmates overlooked. Over the years, our paths crossed more than once, and every time, she had a way of reminding me that in her eyes, I was less. So why did I say yes to coming tonight? Honestly, I still don't know. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe a small, stubborn part of me wanted to prove something, not to her, but to myself. The venue was a rented hall just outside of town, draped in twinkling lights with white linens on every table. Music spilled out onto the sidewalk as I walked up, the kind of upbeat jazz that makes people feel richer than they are. My heels clicked against the concrete, and with each step, I felt the weight of doubt pressing heavier on my shoulders. "You don't belong here, Sarah," a voice whispered in the back of my head. "You'll just end up being the punchline again." I paused outside the door, clutching my small black purse like it could anchor me. For a moment, I considered turning around. No one would notice if I slipped away. But then I thought of my mom's words before I left the house. "Hold your head high, Sarah. No one can make you small unless you let them." With that, I straightened my back and pushed the door open. Inside, the room glowed warm with golden light, laughter bouncing off the walls as guests mingled with champagne glasses in hand. I caught glimpses of sequined dresses, sharp suits, and polished smiles. People looked comfortable, like they belonged. I, on the other hand, felt like a shadow sneaking into a world that wasn't meant for me. Almost immediately, I spotted Lauren. She was at the center of it all, her laughter carrying above the noise, her hand resting gracefully on her fiancé's arm. She looked radiant, every hair in place, every gesture rehearsed like she'd been born for moments like this. When her eyes met mine across the room, she smiled, but it wasn't a warm smile. It was sharp, almost amused, like she'd just spotted the evening's entertainment. I inhaled deeply and walked further inside, reminding myself that I wasn't here for her approval. I found a seat at one of the tables near the edge of the room, quietly watching as waiters moved between guests with trays of appetizers. A couple beside me struck up polite conversation, asking how I knew the bride-to-be. I gave short, simple answers, careful not to reveal too much. But even as I tried to blend in, I felt eyes on me. Little glances, sideways smirks. Maybe I was imagining it. Or maybe not. Then it happened. Lauren drifted closer, arm in arm with her fiancé, a tall man with kind eyes who looked like he hadn't yet learned her sharper edges. She greeted a cluster of guests near me, her laugh ringing out, before finally turning to me. "Sarah," she said sweetly, though her eyes betrayed a different tone. "I didn't expect to see you here. I mean, wow, you made it." The way she said it made it sound less like a welcome and more like a joke. I forced a smile. Wouldn't miss it. She tilted her head, studying me the way someone studies a painting they don't quite understand. Then, with that same sweet but poisoned smile, she added, "Still working as, what was it again? An assistant." A ripple of laughter went through the small group around us, subtle but enough to sting. My cheeks burned, and I wanted to disappear into the floor. She didn't need to say more. The tone in her voice carried everything. Just an assistant. I looked down at my lap, steadying my breathing. Her fiancé gave me an apologetic smile, clearly uncomfortable with her tone, but he didn't say anything. And neither did I. Not yet. The evening stretched on, every minute heavier than the last. Conversations swirled around me, wedding plans, honeymoon destinations, expensive details I couldn't relate to. I sipped water from my glass, wishing it was strong enough to drown out the knot tightening in my chest. At one point, I stepped outside onto the patio to catch my breath. The night air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of pine from the nearby trees. I leaned against the railing, staring out at the darkness, asking myself again why I had come. But before I could answer, I heard the door open behind me. "Sarah," a voice said. I turned. It was her fiancé. He looked hesitant, almost nervous, as he stepped closer. "Hey, I just wanted to say, I'm sorry about earlier. Lauren, she can be a little," he trailed off, searching for a word, then settled on, "blunt." I gave a small nod. "I'm used to it." He studied me for a moment, like he was trying to see something Lauren had never mentioned. "What do you actually do?" he asked. The question hung in the air, simple but weighted. It was the kind of question that could change everything. And right then, standing under the glow of patio lights, I knew this night wasn't going to end the way Lauren thought it would. White right pointing backhand index before I share what happened next. Tell me where you're watching from and don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this. His question lingered in the air, simple yet heavy. What do you actually do? For a moment, I didn't answer. I stared at him under the soft glow of the patio lights, measuring whether I should tell the truth or keep hiding behind the label Lauren had already chosen for me. Before I could decide, the door opened again, and Lauren's laugh sliced through the quiet like glass breaking. "There you are," she said, gliding onto the patio, her sequin dress catching the light. She slipped her hand around his arm, her nails gleaming with a fresh coat of red polish. Then her eyes darted to me. "Oh, Sarah's probably boring you with assistant talk." Her fiancé frowned slightly, but he didn't correct her. "Not yet." I swallowed hard, keeping my voice steady. "We were just talking about work." "Oh, please." Lauren waved her hand dismissively, loud enough that two guests by the doorway turned their heads. "Sarah has the simplest job in the world. She answers phones, schedules coffee runs. You know, that kind of thing. Nothing worth ruining an evening over." The word stung sharper than I expected, not because of what she said, but because of how easily she said it, like it was rehearsed, like she'd been waiting for this exact chance to chip away at me again. I wanted to reply, but she didn't give me the chance. She tucked her fiancé back inside, and I was left standing there, the night air suddenly colder. When I finally walked back into the hall, I could feel the difference. People were watching me more openly now, their smiles edged with curiosity. It was as if Lauren's little performance had given them permission to see me as the evening's entertainment. Dinner was about to be served. Long tables stretched across the hall, candles flickering in the centerpieces, and servers carried trays of wine glasses to each setting. I found my seat near the middle, close enough to the couple that escape wasn't an option. The conversations around me grew louder, laughter rolling over the music. At first, I kept my head down, pushing food around my plate. But then Lauren struck again. "Sarah," she called across the table, her voice sugary sweet. "Why don't you tell everyone what it's like being an assistant? I'm sure we could all use a good laugh tonight." The table chuckled, though uneasily. Some avoided my eyes, others leaned in with interest. Heat crept up my neck, but I forced myself to look at her directly. "I don't think it's all that funny," I said evenly. She smirked. "Oh, come on. What's the hardest part? Choosing the right creamer for your boss's coffee." The laughter was louder this time. Even people at the next table glanced over, curious about the spectacle unfolding. My chest tightened. Every instinct told me to stay quiet, to let it pass. But something in her fiancé's face stopped me. He wasn't laughing. He was watching Lauren carefully, almost uncomfortably, like he was seeing a side of her he didn't recognize. I straightened my shoulders. "Actually, my work takes more than coffee runs," I said calmly. Lauren laughed again, this time tilting her head back dramatically. "Oh, relax, Sarah. Don't take it so seriously. We all know you're just, well, you know." The word just landed like a punch. Just an assistant. Just someone beneath her. Just someone she could use to make herself feel taller. The table erupted again, and my fork clinked against the plate as my hand shook. For a few minutes, I let the noise swallow me. But then came the moment that shifted everything. One of Lauren's cousins leaned across the table and asked her fiancé directly, "So, what does Sarah actually do?" The entire table went quiet. Forks paused mid-air. Glasses stopped halfway to lips. Everyone turned to look at him, then at me. Lauren jumped in before he could answer. "She told you, didn't she? Assistant. Nothing glamorous." But he didn't nod. He turned to me instead. "No," he said clearly, his voice cutting through the tension. "I asked her earlier. I want to hear it from her." Every eye in the room was on me now. My heart thudded in my chest, and for a moment, all I could hear was the faint hum of the overhead lights. I placed my fork down, wiped my hands on the napkin, and lifted my gaze. My voice came out steady, though my pulse raced. "I run a company." The silence that followed was deafening. Someone coughed. A glass clinked against the table. Lauren blinked rapidly, her smile faltering for the first time all evening. "A company," one of the guests repeated, unsure if they'd heard correctly. "Yes," I said firmly, the knot in my chest finally loosening. "I own and manage my own business. Not an assistant. Not a coffee runner. A company that employs people, pays salaries, and builds something real." A ripple went through the table. Whispers, glances, raised brows. Lauren laughed, but it was shaky this time. "Oh, come on, Sarah. Don't exaggerate. What kind of company could you possibly run?" I met her eyes without flinching. "The kind you've heard of." Her fiancé's expression shifted. He leaned back slightly, studying me like he was seeing me for the first time. His lips parted as though he was about to say something, but he stayed silent. The energy in the room changed. The smokes faded, replaced by curiosity, even respect. A few guests asked quiet questions. Where was it based? How long had I been running it? But I only gave short answers. I didn't owe them details. Not tonight. Lauren, though, couldn't let it go. She forced a laugh, louder than necessary. "Well, isn't that something? Sarah, the CEO. Who would have thought?" But her eyes betrayed her. They weren't mocking anymore. They were calculating, nervous. And in that moment, for the first time in years, I didn't feel small. White right pointing backhand index before I continue. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this. The silence stretched longer than I expected. Forks rested on plates, wine glasses lingered in midi, and the laughter that had filled the room earlier now hung like a memory. I felt their eyes on me, some skeptical, some curious, some almost cautious, as though they weren't sure what to make of what I'd just revealed. But it was his gaze that I felt the strongest. Lauren's fiancé. He hadn't laughed when she mocked me. He hadn't joined in the whispers when I said I owned a company. Instead, he studied me now, his brow slightly furrowed, his lips pressed into a thin line as though he was holding back 100 questions. Finally, he broke the silence. "What kind of company?" The question was simple, but his tone carried weight. It wasn't dismissive. It wasn't mocking. It was genuine. Lauren let out a short, sharp laugh, trying to diffuse the tension. "Oh, don't encourage her, Adam," she said, brushing her hand against his arm like she was steering him away from a mistake. "She's just exaggerating. You know how people do that when they want to sound important." But he didn't look at her. His eyes stayed on me. "I asked Sarah," he said quietly, and for a brief second, Lauren's smile faltered. The table stirred with low murmurs. Someone clinked a fork against their glass to cover the awkwardness, but the focus didn't shift. It stayed locked on us. I met his eyes. "It's a consulting firm," I said, steady and measured. Small when I started it. Bigger now. How big? He asked, leaning forward slightly. I hesitated. Revealing too much here felt dangerous, like handing ammunition to the very people who had been waiting for me to slip. But something about his tone, calm, direct, with not a hint of mockery, made me answer. 35 employees, I said. 2 offices. Clients across 5 states. The ripple of whispers was louder this time. Even those who had barely glanced at me earlier now stared openly, folks forgotten, conversations abandoned. Lauren's parents, seated at the far end of the table, exchanged a quick look, one of discomfort, almost alarm. Lauren tried to laugh again, but it rang hollow. Well, isn't that impressive? She said, but her voice lacked its earlier confidence. Adam didn't laugh. He kept watching me, his curiosity growing sharper by the second. And you built it yourself? Yes. When? 4 years ago. The numbers sank in. I could see the math flickering in their minds. My age, my background, the years they thought I spent just assisting. The story they had told themselves about me no longer fit. Lauren shifted uncomfortably, her hand still resting on Adam's arm. But now, he gently moved it away, folding his hands on the table. Why haven't you ever mentioned this before? He asked. That question wasn't just for me. It was for her. I never felt the need to, I replied simply, though my eyes flicked toward Lauren. Some people assume they already know who I am. His jaw tightened. He caught the hint. The dinner continued, but the air had shifted. Guests who once ignored me now tried to engage. A man 2 seats down asked what kind of clients I worked with. A woman near the end of the table wanted to know how I managed to start so young. I gave short, careful answers, enough to satisfy their curiosity, but never too much. I wasn't here to impress them. All the while, Adam kept glancing at me, then at Lauren, his expression unreadable. When dessert was served, he finally leaned closer. His voice was low enough that only I could hear. Why did she tell me you were an assistant? The question landed heavy. I stared at him, trying to gauge whether he truly didn't know or if this was some kind of test. Before I could answer, Lauren cut in with a laugh too loud for the quiet moment. Oh, Adam, don't get caught up in details. You know how Sarah loves to embellish things. He didn't smile. He didn't even glance at her. His eyes stayed locked on mine, waiting. I spoke carefully. I never claimed to be an assistant. That's just the story she preferred. His face hardened, though subtly. His hand tightened around the stem of his glass. He leaned back, as though he needed space to process. Lauren noticed the shift and tried to recover, her voice overly cheerful. Well, let's not bore everyone with career talk. This is an engagement party, after all. She clinked her glass and urged the table to toast again, but the energy was different. People weren't laughing as freely. Some looked at her with faint suspicion. Others glanced at me with new respect. After dessert, people began moving around, mingling between tables. The music picked up again, but Adam found me near the corner of the room. Sarah, he said quietly, his voice firm but not unkind. Can we talk for a minute? I hesitated. About what? About you, he said. About the truth. Lauren's laugh floated across the room, forced and brittle. She was busy keeping attention on herself, oblivious to the fact that the very man she was marrying now stood here, waiting for me to speak. I crossed my arms, my heart pounding. What do you want to know? He didn't hesitate. Everything. The way he said it sent a chill down my spine. Not because of him, but because, in that moment, I realized Lauren's perfect little world was starting to fracture, and she didn't even see it yet. White right pointing backhand index before I continue. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this. The room held a hush like a stretched wire. Fox stopped. Glasses paused. The pause tasted odd and metallic. Eyes found me, widened, then settled into a new shape as the meaning of the single word sank in. Lauren's laugh thinned and fell apart. Her parents, who'd been relaxed moments before, straightened like someone had turned down the heat. Guests exchanged quick glances, shifting mental notes. The music felt distant, and a child's laugh from the foyer faded. Adam's face didn't show shock so much as a slow click of recognition. He stepped forward, steady. "How long have you been doing that?" he asked, a calm, practical question that cut through the stunned silence. 4 years, I said. The numbers hit the room and landed in strange pockets of silence. Talk picked up again, but it sounded different. Where there had been titters and polite smiles, curiosity now threaded through conversations. A woman at the next table, sincere, asked the simple question, "Which industry?" I kept my reply concise. Consulting, operations, mainly for small manufacturers and regional clinics. The shift was subtle at first, then definitive. Heads tilted. A man I recognized from a supplier meeting looked up from his plate with interest. Lauren's father, who'd been composed, lost a little color. She tried to steer the attention back to flowers and dress details, the usual pageant cues. "We're celebrating tonight," she said, voice brittle. "Let's not make this about careers." Adam didn't oblige. He looked from her to me and then asked, practical and direct, "Why didn't anyone mention this before? Why would you call her an assistant?" I felt heat rise but kept my tone measured. It's easier for some to minimize someone else than to reckon with their own smallness. The words weren't dramatic. They were true, and they landed where they needed to. He asked me to step aside with him. We moved to the windows where the cool night pressed against the glass and the room's noise softened. He wanted the story, not spectacle. I told him, plain and short, a cramped rented desk, invoices that had to be chased, nights working under bad light, clients who taught me how to be fame, and a tiny clinic that nearly lost a grant because of inventory issues. I told him about the week of calls, last-minute orders, and spreadsheets that saved supplies from running out. Those were the nights that taught me to keep promises, even when it meant sleeplessness. He listened like someone absorbing facts, not gossip. 35 employees, he said quietly after I finished. Yes, I answered. He whistled, soft, surprised. You did that yourself. It took stubbornness, I said, and saying yes to problems others avoided. We walked back into the room together. Lauren watched with a hard, brittle expression. Her parents closed ranks, touching arms, whispering to each other as if holding an emergency conference. Her mother's smile aimed at me was practiced and thin. Outside the window, the city was a smear of lights. Inside the hall, a woman I'd met years earlier at a trade event found me by the dessert table. She gave me a business card and said, quietly, "If you need a contact in supply, call me. We've been looking for someone who actually keeps promises." Her words were an offering, and far warmer than the earlier jibes. That small gesture, an invitation to talk business, felt more valuable than 1,000 forced apologies would have. It meant doors might open. It meant my work mattered in rooms that had chosen to dismiss it. Lauren's face went pale. She searched for a retort and found none that fit. Her father checked his watch with a rapid, nervous motion. Her mother formed a ring of whispered words with neighbors, furtive and concerned. Adam returned to the group a few minutes later and stood near me. "This changes things," he said simply. Perhaps it would, perhaps not. I had no taste for spectacle. I hadn't set out to humiliate anyone. I had spoken the truth, and the truth behaved like its own small law. "Maybe for the better," I said. He smiled then, a small, honest thing devoid of the showy charm Lauren used on guests. "I'd like to learn more. When things calm, could we sit and talk about the work? About what keeps a CEO awake at night?" Saying the title to his face felt odd and steadying. The word carried weight, not just for him but for all the quiet nights that had built the answer. People drifted, conversation started up again but with a different tempo. Some clustered in hushed chatter, trying on new impressions. Others approached me with questions, Where was my office? How had I landed my first client? And I offered short answers. I wasn't there for sermons. I was there because I had chosen to be myself in a room that had been comfortable with a different story. At the edge of the room, a man who owned a small parts company caught me as he passed. "I think we should talk next week," he said. "I could use help with inventory and vendors." He handed me a slip of paper with a number. Another nod, another contact, another small correction to the ledger of assumptions. Inside, Lauren struggled to compose herself. The facade she relied on showed fissures, a tremor in a smile, a too bright laugh that failed. Her father's jaw stayed tight. Her mother whispered through the rest of the evening without meeting anyone's eyes. When it was time to leave, Lauren moved as if to pull Adam away. He paused, looked back, then followed her. They stepped toward the door with her parents in tow. Their exit was brisk, contained, but not the triumphant parade Lauren had expected it to be. Outside, under the parking lot lights, a man approached and said he worked with a manufacturer who might need my services. Another guest sent a quick message, a polite but eager inquiry about meeting up. My phone buzzed. An email from a prospective client appeared in the subject line. These were small things, no grand applause, but they were real and practical, the kind of change that quietly matters. The party's mood shifted into something quieter and more thoughtful. People would talk for days about how the evening had taken an unexpected turn. Some would scorn, some would praise. But the fact remained, one clear, truthful word had altered the room's view. I walked to my car steady, keys in hand, feeling neither vindictive joy nor hollow triumph. I thought of a tiny co-working desk and the long road from there to the present. Tonight wasn't about proving Lauren wrong. It was about being true to the work I had done. Tomorrow will bring small changes, but tonight I let myself savor the quiet victory before the next morning's steady work, and I slept without doubt or fear. The night air still clung to me when I slid into the driver's seat of my car. My hands rested on the wheel, but I didn't start the engine right away. The glow from the parking lot lamps spilled across the windshield, cutting soft angles through the glass. My chest rose and fell in measured breaths, though inside, everything spun like a carousel refusing to stop. The silence gave me space to replay the last hour, Lauren's laughter breaking like glass, her parents' faces drained of color, the questions whispered behind champagne flutes, Adam's steady voice asking for the truth. I hadn't planned for the evening to turn into that. I'd only intended to endure it, maybe sip water in the corner, slip out before dessert. Instead, one word had rolled from my mouth and rearranged the entire room. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, as if grounding myself. The truth was out, and no one could take it back. For years, I'd kept quiet, letting the world believe I was just an assistant. It had been easier than explaining the nights spent poring over budgets, the early mornings spent on calls with suppliers in different time zones, the risks that nearly emptied my savings more than once. Now, that hidden life wasn't hidden anymore. And strangely, instead of fear, I felt lighter. My phone buzzed in the passenger seat. A message lit up from a number I didn't recognize. Impressed with what I heard tonight. Let's talk business. Monday. I stayed at it, unsure whether to laugh or cry. The truth had barely settled, and already it was reshaping opportunities. Still, a whisper of doubt crept in. What if people thought I was arrogant? What if they assumed I had been playing some twisted game, hiding my role to spring a surprise later? The human mind doesn't just accept validation, it tests it, pokes at it, waits for it to collapse. I tilted my head back against the headrest. Lauren's face replayed in my mind, the sharp turn of her jaw, the brittle gleam in her eyes as she realized she could no longer frame me as small. That moment cut deeper than any insult she had ever thrown. Because I saw something raw in her, something closer to fear than mockery. The truth had shaken her more than my silence ever had. When I finally drove off, the road was mostly empty. My headlights carved twin ribbons of light on the asphalt. I kept the radio off, letting the hum of the engine and the steady rhythm of tires on pavement be my company. At a stoplight, I glanced at myself in the mirror. My reflection looked the same brown hair tied back, same tired eyes, same black dress that felt too simple among the glittering gowns at the party. Yet I knew something had shifted. The world now saw me differently, and I couldn't pretend otherwise. Halfway home, I pulled into a quiet diner I used to visit back when I was juggling 2 jobs to pay rent. The neon sign flickered, buzzing faintly in the cool air. Inside, the smell of fried onions and coffee wrapped around me. I slid into a booth, ordered a cup of black coffee, and wrapped both hands around the warm mug as if it were the only anchor I had. Across from me, a young couple leaned close, whispering excitedly about their wedding plans. I couldn't help but catch fragments: flowers, music, guest lists. They reminded me of Lauren and Adam earlier in the evening, except without the sharp edges and practiced performance. Their excitement was genuine, soft, and untainted by showmanship. I sipped my coffee slowly, letting the bitterness ground me. The truth wasn't just about titles or money. It was about years of work finally demanding to be acknowledged. Tonight, I hadn't forced the truth out. It had simply refused to stay buried. A waitress stopped by, pen poised over her pad. "You look like you've had a long night," she said kindly. I gave a small smile. "You could say that." She nodded knowingly. Sometimes telling the truth feels heavier than keeping it quiet, but in the long run, it always sits lighter. She left before I could answer, but her word stuck. By the time I left the diner, the weight on my chest had shifted. Not gone, but changed. I drove home, pulled into my driveway, and sat for a moment with the engine off, listening to the ticking of cooling metal. Inside, I kicked off my shoes and sat on the edge of the couch, the glow of a single lamp washing the room in amber. I let my phone buzz in the background, emails, messages, maybe even gossip, but I didn't reach for it. Tonight wasn't about who wanted a meeting or what rumors would spin out of that party. Tonight was about me finally allowing myself to exist fully, without shrinking to fit someone else's narrative. I thought about Adam again. His voice had been steady, curious, not judgmental. "This changes things," he'd said, and I wondered if he understood just how much it had already changed, not just for him, but for me. For years, I'd walked into rooms and kept quiet, allowing others to underestimate me. I thought it was safer that way, but now, the truth had escaped my lips, and I realized safety wasn't the same as freedom. Freedom came from owning my story, even when it startled people, even when it made them uncomfortable. Later, when I finally crawled into bed, exhaustion pulled at me, but sleep didn't come right away. My mind was a carousel again, cycling through every detail of the night. Lauren's laughter, her parents' pale faces, the guests whispering, Adam's questions, the woman with the business card, the man with the number, the waitress's words. They swirled together until a single thought surfaced clear and steady. The truth had power. It didn't need a stage. It didn't need applause. It only needed to be spoken once, and it could ripple through people in ways I couldn't predict. As my eyes finally closed, I felt something rare: peace. Not the fragile peace of avoiding conflict, but the stronger, steadier peace of knowing I had spoken my truth and stood by it. Whatever came tomorrow, I was ready. Because tonight, the truth had finally sunk in. Not just for them. For me, too.